Station, everyone. Happy new comic book day. Happy Whiplash Wednesday with the PCP Army Bad Batch. It's going to be a great freaking day. Just hold on tight. Guys, it all started over at Nick Comic Culture's Cadets Toys and Comics. Check out what they have for new comic book day, what they have for toys, collectibles, Funko Pops, you name it, they might have it. And just go check out their video, see what they have. Maybe there's something that you might want. And I'll get to the rest of what the PCP Army Bad Batch has to offer on this Whiplash Wednesday and New Comic Book Day. But for now, it is Chatting with the Comic Community, episode 37. And my guest today is long overdue. I should have had this individual on a long time ago. I love her on every Sunday. It's church for me. It's church for me. It's church for Bobby Delgado. And the two of them just have such great chemistry. But she also has her own channel. And she puts out great content. Hopefully after this, she'll be putting out more content in that. So hopefully you guys, the viewers watching, guys, leave comments down below and say, come on, let's see more content from you. Because she puts out great stuff and puts a lot of work into it. And it's just fantastic. But enough of me talking up about her. Let's just bring out that comic girl.
Howdy, friends. How are you, Station? Am I doing it right?
Station.
It's my first ever Station. I'm so proud of myself.
I'm proud of you too. So this is the first time we're talking one-on-one. I've talked with your co-host over at Comics Will Break Your Heart, your Sunday show and stuff. I've talked to her on stream a couple of times, but this is the first interaction you and I have had.
It is. It's so exciting. And we've talked in DMs before. We've talked on chats with the Sunday show. We've talked in chats on other people's channels. But yeah, it's the first ever face-to-face interaction. And like you said, it's long overdue.
So for the viewers watching that don't know a lot about you, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. My name is Mars. I am basically the self-proclaimed that comic girl. I basically just love everything comic related, everything nerdy related. As you graciously introduced me, I am one half of the amazing duo behind the Comic Books Will Break Your Heart channel and the Casually Comic Sunday show, where we do reviews every week. We're usually choosing violence over what books, and like you said, it's like a Casually Comic Sunday church, and it's just an absolute blessing and a treat to be able to do that every Sunday with my girl Jennifer. But I also do my own channel over at That Comic Girl, where I do a lot of I don't want to say reviews, but I do a lot of recommended reading. I do a lot of deep dive into characters, a lot of self-exploratory personal essays about comics that I love and genres that I love and things like that. But honestly, my main focus between both channels is just doing everything I can to get more people reading comics, because at the end of the day, comic books are for everyone, and I stand by it. Everybody should be reading comics. There is a comic out there for everyone. So that's basically me.
I agree. And that I remember how that started. I remember you guys got that started in this community a long time ago, you and Jennifer, that there's a comic book out there for everyone. And that was oh man, that was a year ago. I remember hearing you guys talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't take all the credit. Comics Are For Everyone, I believe, was started by the Comic Book Defense League. But I honestly, once I heard it years and years and years ago, it was basically what I used, not only to brand myself, but to just brand, for comics. I even have, you can't see it because I'm filming, but on my laptop, I even have a big sticker that says Comics Are For Everyone. So it is something that I heavily preach.
So let's get right into it. How did you get into reading slash collecting comics.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's like several different like origin stories on like how I got into comic books. Like I feel like I've been rebooted half a dozen times, like most comic book characters. I was always really into comic book characters. You know, I grew up with X-Men the animated series every Saturday morning. I was rushing home from school so I could catch Batman the animated series. You know, I grew up with a lot of like the video games. But I really didn't start reading comics until high school. And it's because I had an English teacher. I was in 10th grade. And he kind of picked up that, you know, I was really into comic books or comic book characters, at least, because we would talk all the time about, you know, the Dark Knight was really popular around that time. We would talk about the Tim Burton Batman movies. And he came up to me one day and he's like, have you ever read like an actual comic? And he wasn't doing it to be condescending, but he's like, you know, have you ever read the comics? Because I was an avid reader back then as well of just normal books. And I was like, no, I haven't. I don't know where to start. You know, it's just overwhelming. And this was at a time when I didn't know the difference from a floppy copy to a graphic novel. And he gave me a copy of The Watchmen to take home and read. And I remember just falling completely in love because The Watchmen, while it is superheroes, it's not Batman and Superman take down Lex Luthor. It's not Spider-Man taking down the Green Goblin. It was a story about something very real that felt like could happen, you know, and a society that, you know, we could live in, and a constructive idea on it, basically. And I fell in love with it. And I immediately went out and purchased books like Batman Hush and Marvel Civil War, which are not good books by any means to start out with, because there's dozens of characters. And if you don't know who these characters are, you're going to get lost. And I kind of like fell off of it from there. You know, I didn't really touch comics. I didn't pick up comics. And then I had a roommate who gave me a Catwoman comic as a Christmas present when I was in college. And she told me where she got it from. And it was a comic book shop locally. And I found myself in there one day, and I became like obsessed. You know, I had a really great friend, an employee of the shop, who basically taught me a lot of what I know. He, you know, gave me books. Again, didn't give me some of the best books, because he gave me books like Avengers versus X-Men and Red Hood and the Outlaws, which again are not great starting points, but it kept me hooked and it kept me reading. So when I went home, I found myself going to local shops and starting a pool list and falling in love with characters and collecting. And it has kind of spiraled, as you can see. It's spiraled. I need help.
Now, and you're more of a picking up like a trade paperbacks and stuff for reading purposes, and that you don't pick up a ton of floppies unless they're really enticing.
Yes and no. Because I do still go to the shop every Wednesday. I do pick up a lot of you know, first issues. I have books that are on my pull list, you know, because we do the review show every Sunday. But I'm sure, as you've seen, because you watch every Sunday, I'm very picky with what I'll put on my pull list. And if I don't absolutely love it, then absolutely yes, I will wait and reserve myself for a trade, because it's just cheaper and it's less space. But if you actually come to visit, I have an entire filing cabinet. Actually, I have two filing cabinets that are filled with floppy copies. Like, I have an entire drawer dedicated to Green Arrow and Black Canary, an entire drawer dedicated to just Catwoman covers and variants. And now that I'm getting into characters from Marvel, like Scarlet Witch, and characters like X-23, All New Wolverine, and things like that, I love collecting variants and things like that. I know they don't really have a purpose, but you know, I like to just take them out sometimes and be like, this is neat and it's mine now. So yeah, it's a little bit of yes, column A, column B, where I don't buy everything that's new, but I do a lot of like back issue hunting and a lot of cover hunting and things like that.
Yeah, I find myself more going towards the trade paperbacks. Like I kind of took one from your book and like was like, well, she's picking up very little and just waiting. Like that's the smart thing to do. Like, so I started doing the same thing, and I was like, I'll just pick it up and trade when it comes out and stuff.
Yeah.
So.
And typically when I find these like variants and like these covers for characters that I like, unless I feel like it's a book that's going to spike, like say for example, like a #1 issue where I'm like, okay, I need every variant, or I like this cover in particular. I try to like keep a mental note and then possibly find it in like a $1 bin or a $2 bin later on down the road, because again, it's just so much. I mean, yeah, it's more work, but in the long run, financially, it helps.
Yeah, I do that with Harley Quinn's, like the Derek Chew variants for Harley Quinn,
Mhm.
because I love those.
Yeah, they're really great.
So you started with Watchmen in that, like, so you've been reading since like college,
I've been
and
reading since like college and high school, so it's been about 12 years now since I started reading. 12 years, I would say like 12, 13 years since I read, say, Watchmen, and it's been about 10 years since I started regularly collecting.
all right. So like you're now well versed in a lot of superheroes. Like, have you gravitated towards a lot of, like, I know you just said like Green Arrow and Black
Mhm.
Canary. You fell in love with them. Like, have you read everything from them?
Oh, of course not, because I feel like it's almost impossible to read everything of like a certain character. I used to be that crazy person who thought that I could. And I would, make lists of like, okay, these are the books that they're featured in and these are the books that they're in, and all their mainline titles. But I also am not a huge fan of Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age comic writing. I tend to stick more modern age. So like Green Arrow is one of the few examples where I don't want to say I forced myself because I did enjoy it, but I coerced myself to read like the 80s Mike Grell run and things like that. But I've always tried to go back and read like his first appearances when he showed up in like the 40s and 50s and 60s and struggle to, just because it is so different. But yeah, I definitely gravitate towards like DC comic characters in particular. And I'm slowly dipping my foot into Marvel now.
Yeah, I tend to do the same. Like, DC is like my go-to. I'd
Hmm.
rather DC, but I did read like some Black Widow that
Hmm.
was coming out, and I plan to get into some Black Cat. But I did start reading first couple of issues of Tom King's Vision.
Hmm.
I've been enjoying that.
Very good.
So
Very good. That was actually, so like I said, I gravitated toward DC. I didn't really start reading Marvel until about 4-ish years ago. Like I blatantly just refused. I was like, I'm not reading Marvel. I don't like Marvel characters. I was kind of a snob about it. And I was like really sick one year and I couldn't leave my house for like 2 weeks. So I was like getting all these books from the library and I finally decided to try some Marvel books. And Tom King's Vision is actually one of the first Marvel books that I really read because I love Tom King so much that I was like, I feel like this is a good, jumping point, going from one writer that I really love at DC over to what he does at Marvel. And it helped tremendously. And then, I spiraled from there and I started reading Hawkeye. I started reading All New Wolverine. And, 4 years later of finally deciding I'm going to read some Marvel, I'm getting into it.
so have you read Hawkspox like Jennifer wants you to?
Have I read Hawkspox? If Jennifer is listening, absolutely. I finished Hawkspox. I loved Hawkspox. It's probably the best book I've ever read. If Jennifer is not listening, then I've only read like 5 pages. I've been slacking lately on a lot of reading with the holidays, and I'm getting over this like really nasty chest cold. So like I've done no reading within the past like 3 weeks. It's awful, and I feel terrible. I really do. So Hoxpox, it's on the list somewhere on the list.
I, I've told Jennifer this before, and that I did not enjoy it. But it was like when I was getting right back into comics, I started reading that,
Mm.
knowing like the X-Men how they were in the '90s and stuff with the cartoon, and then jumping into that, I was like, no, this is not my X-Men.
Yeah, no. I mean, I do think it's in one way it's a great jumping on point because it is a fresh start for the X-Men, but at the same time, if you're familiar with the X-Men, either from comics or like for me, I'm familiar with them from cartoons and movies and shows and stuff like that. And like the occasional X-Men comic I would pick up, I'm the same way where I'm like, that's not my X-Men. What is going on here? Where are all the villains? I'm like, Magneto's on the good side now, Mr. Sinister's on the good side now. Like, who are we fighting against if all your bad guys are now good guys?
Yeah, and there's so much X titles. Like, I haven't jumped in. I'll probably jump into some Marvel, but I don't think I'll jump into X-Men for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some of the old stuff, but
X-Men is a lot. I'm starting to get into some older X-Men stuff. Like I started reading like Josh Whedon's Astonishing X-Men. My partner has been very vocal about me reading Grant Morrison's new X-Men. And I'm not a huge fan of Grant Morrison at all. And I started to read new X-Men and I wasn't interested, but then I hear them talk about, different arcs and all these characters that Grant Morrison created that are kind of like the weirder characters, like, and made some of them more relevant. Like Pixie's a big one that apparently they kind of reinvented and things like that. And it's like, I'm kind of interested. So I'm starting to pick up arcs here and there of new X-Men and read some of that.
That's cool. Have you got into any other characters throughout Marvel, like Daredevil, Punisher?
I wanna listen. I've never read Daredevil in my life. I've read one Punisher book. It's Space Punisher. Don't judge me. It's probably one of the greatest stories ever made. It's Punisher literally in space. It's great. If you haven't read it, please pick it up. It's just bonkers alternate universe. Like it's weird. That's all I can put it as. It's Punisher in space and it's weird. Daredevil, I'm conflicted because like I really want to start reading Daredevil. I started re-binging the Daredevil Netflix show and rewatching that because I just felt an urge to rewatch it. And I'm like, this is a really great character. But every time I try to read Daredevil, I'm like, I'm so bored. What's going on? So I'm focusing a lot on like Scarlet Witch now and She-Hulk and Moon Knight. Those are some of my go-to characters right now, but I'm slowly diving out into more and more territory.
So do you feel like your DC reading list is going down more and more that you're going into Marvel?
Yes and no. Because I feel like with a lot of DC titles, especially when we look at like older stuff that's come out, or like stuff pre New 52, New 52 even, and Rebirth, there's a lot of things that I've already read, and I've basically read everything that I've shown an interest in. It's not like Marvel where I'll be reading something from Marvel and a new character like Elsa Bloodstone will show up, and I'm suddenly interested in this character, and I want to track down their storylines. I spent 8 or 9 years with DC Comics. So I'm still reading new stuff that comes out. Like I love, Tom Taylor's new Suicide Squad that was out, his Son of Kal-El that was out. Basically everything Tom Taylor does is gold, honestly. So if he's writing it for DC, I pick it up. So like I have a lot of, I definitely have more DC titles on my pull list than Marvel. But in terms of reading trade paperback, I'm definitely reading more Marvel.
Yeah, it's. I knew you were like well versed in comics, but I did not know that you were like that many years in. I had no idea.
I'm definitely the crazy lady that when I'm talking about DC comic characters, I refer to them as like their first name. Like I've known them as for years and like I'm friends with them. Like I'll just randomly be like, oh, like Oliver Queen did this. And like somebody will be like, can you speak English and tell me who that is? Or I'll be like, oh, Jason Todd did this. Or yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's just what I'm used to.
So you did mention like the X-Men cartoon and stuff. Did you grow up with a lot of DC cartoons as well, like the Batman animated series, Static Shock?
Absolutely. I didn't watch as much Static Shock and I didn't watch as much Batman Beyond. But I did watch a lot of Justice League Unlimited, regular Justice League, and then of course Batman the Animated Series was like a big one that I watched. And then of course like Superman the Animated Series, which I didn't watch as regularly as Batman, but when there were episodes like that Granny Goodness would show up in and the Furies would show up and I was like obsessed and like I was suddenly interested, which makes a lot of sense now because as an adult I'm obsessed with these characters. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense now.
Now, did you follow all of the animated movies that they're coming out with?
I'm not a huge fan of the new animated series or animated movies that they're doing. I know with DC Comics for a while they were following this like universe that they created and it was heavily based on the New 52. I'm not a big fan of the New 52. I mean, I'm thankful for it because it's really what got me into comics because it was coming out at the time that I was getting into comics. But I'm not crazy about what they did. So I love a lot of the older DC animated movies like Batman, Superman, Public Enemies, and Apocalypse, Justice League Doom, Batman Under the Red Hood. Those are some of my the Wonder Woman animated movie. They're some of my absolute favorite things to watch. But in terms of some of the newer ones, I tried jumping into like Batman Hush. which they dropped the ball on that one, and it's not even Hush, it's the Riddler. So I was a little bit betrayed on that one. And I feel like they're trying to get really edgy now, which DC Comics has been doing for a while, but sometimes I just wish they would adapt a really great storyline the way that they used to, because it's what we were seeing. And now they are trying to adapt storylines that we're familiar with, but they're also trying to make it their own. And that's fine, but it feels like they're, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I wish they would be either all the way in or all the way out.
I get that. I've been enjoying them. I know, yeah, I think I've watched them before. I've read the comics, but like I see what you mean, because like I've read some of the comics now, like Hush and that, and like see the differences in it, see the differences in Long Halloween and so forth. So, but I do kind of like what they're doing, and hopefully it brings in new comic readers.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I do love about a lot of these DC animated movies that are, I don't want to say playing the half and half out game, because, somebody like yourself maybe sees a Long Halloween, but has never read the comic, like the story a lot, and now want to go and read the original source material. I think that's great, because I kind of did something similar with, Batman, Superman, Public Enemies, and I did it with Batman, Superman, Apocalypse, which they were named something different. So I had to do a little bit more research in terms of, okay, what is this story based off of? But then they became some of my favorite storylines in comics. So I definitely love the animated universes for that. Even when we look at the TV shows like Young Justice, Teen Titans, and things like that. Anything that can bring more people into the world of comics, I'm here for it.
Now, speaking of Young Justice, have you been enjoying that at all?
I watched the first 1.5 seasons, I believe. I remember not really liking it a whole lot. It was one of those where this is good and all, but if I wanted to watch teenagers be teenagers, I would just watch Teen Titans because it already exists. I will say I do commend the creative teams for taking some of the liberties that they did, especially when we look at characters like Red Hood Arsenal, where they kind of went with this weird clone saga for him and then cut off his arm and he had to figure out how to live again. And at first I hated it, but then I was like, wait a minute, this is a metaphor for his drug addiction in the comics, which obviously they're not going to show in a children's show, but I kind of like how they were able to adapt it and modernize it, for lack of a better word, or at least make it appropriate for, younger viewers.
Yeah, I think, when did Young Justice come out? It came out a while ago. Like, I know they did the 2 seasons and then it was out. They canceled it for the longest time and then they brought it back.
I want to say it was like early, like 2010s, like around like that 2012, like 2011 era. Cause I remember it was coming out as I was getting into comics, but then I didn't really watch it until about a year or two. I didn't even watch it, I don't think, until after it went on its like hiatus / is it being canceled sort of deal.
It did introduce me to like a favorite villain of mine in that, and I don't know, I can't even explain why. He's like, I just like his charismatic ability, and then he was like also the father of Artemis, but talking about Sportsmaster.
Oh yeah, no, and then that's another thing cool that I like about that, is that it introduces a lot of really cool characters that we don't get to see a lot of. Like, we get to see Cheshire, and Cheshire is one of my favorite, comic book villainesses, especially when she's written by Gail Simone. But it's not one that people talk about. So again, I love the Young Justice team for taking more than just your Joker, your Riddler, your Lex Luthor, and being able to introduce new characters to new audiences. It's really great.
So let's move to the cinematic portion of it. Like, not just talking Marvel, not just talking DC, but like even indies and stuff. Has there been like shows that you absolutely love, like the adaptations from the comic books to the big screen or to the TV?
First one that's coming to my head, ironically enough, is The Old Guard, which debuted on Netflix about a year or two ago. It's an indie. It started off as an indie comic that was published by Image Comics. It's written by Greg Rucka, and I recently fell in love with The Old Guard. I think because of the movie. So it was a book that I had on my shelf, and the movie was coming out, and I love Charlize Theron, so I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna watch it." But I was like, let me finally sit down and read the book, and I became obsessed with it. And I will honestly say, while there are changes, because obviously there's going to be a lot of things out there that can't be one-to-one. You're going to have to change stuff and modernize it. But it's probably one of the best comic book adaptations I've ever seen. There's a lot of, page to screen moments that, as somebody who recently read it, I was able to see it immediately and commended them for that fact. I also really like Y the Last Man, even though I haven't finished Y the Last Man, and I've also never read the comic book for Y the Last Man, but I really enjoyed that show. And then more recently, I know you said, we don't have to talk about Marvel or DC, but Marvel's Hawkeye right now is my favorite, because when we talk about page to screen adaptations, that to me is the most love letter to a series or a comic book that I have ever seen. They have to twist stuff to fit in with this larger universe they've already created. But, watching the most recent episode, there was a conversation between Kate and Clint about a boomerang arrow. And I got excited because I'm like, wait a second, this is a conversation word for word, line for line that happens in the comics. And it's little moments like that I just get really, really excited over.
I can get that. I'd probably get the same way. I'd be like, oh my God, they said it. They did it.
They did it. They did the thing. And it's funny because it was like 2 weeks prior. I was like, they probably aren't going to do it. But I'd really like it if they introduced this character, or I'd really like it if they did this scene. And then a week later they do it. And I'm like, I was kidding, but thank you. Thank you so much.
So I haven't read any Hawkeye, but I hear people are talking about how it's connected with Matt Fraction's Hawkeye, right?
Yes, it is Matt Fraction and David Age's Hawkeye, which was another jumping point for me getting into Marvel. And that is a book that I can't recommend enough because it reads like an indie comic. It does not read like a superhero comic. So this is a book that I actually recommend to a lot of people that I know that don't read comics, don't like superheroes, or maybe they do like superheroes and they are familiar at least with the Avengers. They know who Hawkeye is, because it's a series that you can get into with absolutely no knowledge at all. And they give you everything there, black and white. And it's a treat from start to finish. I don't want to call it a superhero equivalent to Saga, but it's definitely, the other book. There's 2 books that I always shove into people's hands, and it's Saga and Hawkeye.
I'm going to have to actually look for that now at my library, check it out, see if I can find it. Because I wouldn't mind reading that. I've been enjoying Hawkeye as well.
It's very, very good.
And speaking on Y the Last Man, I was enjoying that, and I stopped watching it once I heard that it was canceled, because I'm like,
that's basically what I did. I fell behind, and I was like, oh, I'm going to catch up at some point, and things happened, and then it got canceled, and I'm like, well, what's the point?
Yeah, it's just like, what happens if I really enjoy this and then I know it's done?
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Is there a possibility that another network could pick it up?
Absolutely. So there's definitely been talks that other networks could pick it up. Warner Brothers, DC Comics, and by extension Vertigo, because Y the Last Man was a Vertigo comic, which was a imprint of DC before they were, closed up, ripped to Vertigo Comics. But they work very closely with WB, and WB is a big part of HBO Max. So a lot of people think that it could definitely go to a platform like HBO Max. And if I'm being honest with you, I think that it would actually sit better there, because Y the Last Man does a lot of very mature themes. It was marketed as a very adult comic book. Maybe not adult in the way that Watchmen was, but it's definitely a more mature comic book. And I think HBO Max would honestly be the perfect home for it. So, it went so long in development that it would not surprise me if somebody else picked it up.
Yeah, and us as fans, if any indication, we got the Justice League back up on the air. Like
Mhm.
us as fans, we could probably get Why the Last Man. Like
People could do
hashtag get
anything.
Why the Last Man on the air.
Yeah.
So other than that, like any other Marvel movie or TV shows that you're enjoying?
Marvel TV shows. I did like Loki. I loved WandaVision. WandaVision, I was excited for WandaVision, but I feel very thankful for a show like WandaVision because it helped me connect to Scarlet Witch. And now that I've seen it, I've become like the self-proclaimed like Scarlet Witch #1 fan. I'm like, oh, I have to read everything. I have to collect everything. I need all the little figures and all the action figures and statues and stuff. So those are the ones that I've definitely been enjoying. I don't think there's any other. I mean, other than it's not new, but like I said, I've been rewatching Daredevil, and reconnecting with Daredevil, and I'm just reminded how much I love Wilson Fisk, and Wilson Fisk can do no wrong in my eyes, and Wilson Fisk is a good guy, and I really love the Kingpin. He's so cool.
Now, I know everybody's speculating. Do you think he's going to make his appearance in Hawkeye?
I don't know if he's gonna make his appearance in Hawkeye. Spoiler alert to anybody who hasn't seen episode 2. No, I'm sorry, episode 3. He kind of already showed up. We saw the cufflinks. We heard his voice. We saw the black suit. To me, that's Kingpin's in Hawkeye. Like he's in Hawkeye, and then 3 days later, Kevin Feige's like Charlie Cox is back in the MCU as Daredevil, and I'm like, all right, we're rolling here. So I would love to see Kingpin show up in Hawkeye. That would be my dream. I think he's going to be saved to show up in Echo because Echo is supposed to be getting her own show. And considering in the comics, I don't know if you know this, but in the comics, Kingpin is actually Echo's adopted father. And it seems like in this one, they're more so making it maybe either an adopted uncle or her uncle in general. So I think he's definitely going to make a larger presence, pun intended, in Echo.
Now, speaking back on WandaVision, they did announce that Agatha is getting her own series. Now, do you think they're going to go prior to like, or just like a story about her, or are they going to go right after WandaVision just because they're not going to do a second season of WandaVision?
With Agatha, they could honestly do either or. And I think that I would be happy with either or because I think seeing her origin could be really cool. We kind of got a glimpse at it in WandaVision, but she is such a character with a long history that we could definitely see more and explore more of her past and before she met Wanda. And it would also give us some more insight into the idea of chaos magic and magic in the MCU in general. But part of me also wants to see where she's at now because seeing her in WandaVision being trapped in the thing that she hates most, especially if we put it as like a limited series, it's maybe 4 episodes or 5 episodes, I think it could be a lot of really fun and really bonky that we could experiment with in the way that we saw WandaVision.
Or you can have it set in like right after like WandaVision and then have her kind of like in that state that Wanda left her in, but then having her kind of like having flashbacks of who she was and who she is and stuff. And that way we can find out more about her as she's cracking in the,
Yeah. No,
that'd be interesting.
you could definitely blend the two together. That would work.
And you can go further with that. I know there's a lot of people that are not interested in that Agatha Harkness, but I'm interested. I loved her as a character in there and the actress who played her as well.
Oh no, she's great. I kind of resonate with what people are saying where it's like it feels like everyone and their mother is either getting a movie or a TV show or a Disney Plus special. It's almost like you could take a dartboard and throw a dart and it lands on somebody and they have a TV show. And I resonate with that. Like I get that there is definitely such a thing as too much and oversaturation, but at the same time, you could give me 50 plates of the same thing. And because I'm such a big comic book fan and because I'm such a big nerd and I love the MCU, I'm going to watch everything you put in front of me.
Yeah, same here. If it's like, I probably like, even with the CW shows, like I enjoy those. And I probably watch everything that comes out with those, and every DC animated movie that comes out, any Marvel movie, any like I'm always first in line. Why the last man? So like, even when we weren't comic book fans, we were comic book fans.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what I always like, because people always ask, have you always been into comics? And I tell them I might not have always been reading comics, but I definitely had a love and an interest in these characters. I mean, I had Wizard World posters of covers that I now collect hanging on my walls that I didn't really know. Like, I always was a fan, even if I wasn't a fan to some people.
Yeah, because I remember owning Spider-Man cards, Marvel cards, Spider-Man toys and stuff, but I wasn't reading the comics at that age and stuff because we didn't really have a comic book store. We had a few comics that showed up in our grocery stores, but that was about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember growing up, because my brother, he was the young boy of the house, so he always got the really cool, Marvel action figures. And I remember that he would get, the old Marvel Legends that used to come with the comic books, and they used to come with copies of the Ultimate Comics. And I always remember reading those and looking at the pictures in those, and getting really excited. And then, of course, with his hundreds of action figures for different superheroes with Marvel and DC, we used to spread them out on the floor, sit down, and then one by one we would pick a character for our army and then have them fight against each other. So it was like early on I was already picking characters that I was really attached to and I really, really liked. So that love and that spirit was always there.
Now, I do see some Funko Pops behind you in that. Have you been avid in collecting those? Have you collected figures as well?
Yes, I collect lots of figures. You can't see it, but I have 4 shelves of just action figures for DC Comics of like characters that I love. So I have, all the variations of Green Arrow, all the variations of Black Canary, I have the Scumbag Boyfriend Army, so Black Mask, Deadshot, Hush, characters like that. And then I have 7 shelves over there that you can't see of Funko Pops. So I've kind of scaled back on Funkos. Somebody once made a comment that Funko Pops are the millennial version of a Beanie Baby. And once somebody said that, I was a little embarrassed and I was like, I gotta stop buying Funkos. But I like them because sometimes they're characters that I feel like will never get a figure, or they're so cheap that I'm like, oh, it's a figure of a character I really, really like. So I'm kind of back and forth on if I'm done buying Funkos or if I'm going to keep collecting.
I've never heard of that before, but like it does make sense that they are the millennial version of a Beanie Baby. But I think they surpassed that.
They
I think
have.
with so many different variations and different characters, like you don't even have to be a Funko collector. You could just be like, I'm this collector. I just want to collect everything of this person.
There's definitely more value and more worth in a Funko Pop than a Beanie Baby. That is for sure.
And I do have my Red Hood. I'll show you Red Hood versus Deathstroke, the one where they're attacking each
Oh,
other
for
on the
the
platform.
for the comic book cover. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I haven't gotten any of the like the action poses, like the scenes, I think is what they call them. I haven't done any of the vehicles or things like that. I've strictly focused on the individual figures.
Now, has your figure collecting of like Green Arrow and mostly the DC characters transferred over to picking up statues at all?
Yeah, so I do have some statues. I have the Stanley Archer statues behind me here of the DC collectible girls. I have a couple of Bombshell figures. I'm a huge fan of the Diamond Select collectibles because I don't have any on screen, unfortunately. But they're really, really great value PVC figures that are a nice sturdy plastic, but they're only like $40 and they're really big and they've got really great poses for a lot of characters. So I do collect a lot of them. I haven't been collecting as much as late because I started to run out of space. However, there are plans to be moving into a new, bigger space. So it is very possible that with having more room and more shelves to display stuff, my love for picking up statues and collectibles will be fast tracked.
And I want you to show off all of your figures because, like, yeah, I've never seen any of these figures or any of these toys at all.
There's so much. I keep telling myself that I want to do like a room tour for my channel. But there's so much here and it's so jam-packed that it's like getting everything pristine and perfect and happy to the point where I can show it off is almost impossible. So that's definitely a plan for when I move into the new spaces. I will be doing a studio tour and showing off more of my collectibles and more of my figures for sure.
I look forward to that. I really do. So, keeping with DC and that, and how much you love DC toys, comics, everything else, you're wearing a PlayStation shirt.
I am.
Um, I love the Batman games. Like, I'm not a huge like superhero type. Like, I played the games throughout the years, but like whenever I jumped on Batman, like the Arkham games and stuff, I absolutely love them. What was your opinion on them?
The Arkham games actually, I think, helped me get into comics because those came out right before I started reading comics. And then they continued to come out when I started, building my own pool list and I started reading actual comic books. I'm a huge fan of Arkham Asylum. I love Arkham City, of course. I think it's probably the best one out of the four. Arkham, I'm having a brain fart on what the third one is called.
Arkham Origins.
Arkham Origins, I think, is a really great game. I don't think it gets enough love because, for whatever reason, with the studio being rushed and some of the changes that were made, but I think it also is a really great starting point for like characters. Like it's the whole reason why I fell in love with Black Mask as a character. I also played Arkham Knight, which did not care for Arkham Knight, but I played it. I beat it. I've tried to play it again and I just don't have as much fun, but it is a series that I continuously go back and play, and I can definitely attribute a lot of those games towards my love for comics and these characters.
Yeah, Arkham Knight was a little different. Like spoilers, it was Jason Todd.
It was Jason Todd. Even though we were told it wasn't going to be Jason Todd, it was Jason Todd all along, guys.
I think what I loved about that game was the fact that you got to drive the Batmobile.
See, and that's what I hated. I mean, I liked it, but it overstayed its welcome. It would have been fun to drive the Batmobile for, 20 minutes. But I ended up driving the Batmobile for more like 7 or 8 hours of gameplay. When your final boss fight is in the Batmobile, we've kind of overcrossed our steps here.
Yeah, there was some challenging things that you had to do in the Batmobile, and I'd always like, I think there was like the ramp part, and you had to get the vehicle in the right place. Like I think I spent at least 6 hours of like not all at once, but like trying to get into that part, and it just kept tipping. So I was like, so other than that, Origins, I don't know. That's the one where
that's the weird prequel one that happens around Christmas. So it happens even before it came out after, but story-wise, it happens before Arkham Asylum.
Yeah, and Arkham. What's the one where Joker turns into this big beast? Like he's the Bane Joker.
That's Arkham City. That's Arkham City. Yes, Arkham City, because he dies at the end of Arkham City, and Arkham Knight is basically like the Joker is dead, so who else is going to take over now? Because Batman's sad that his best friend is dead. So,
It did have really good graphics in Night though too. Like the starting of it's the Joker laying on the getting cremated, isn't it?
Yeah, he's getting cremated, and I remember buying the game because I bought it first day, played it, and I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for something to happen, and then you have to press a button to cremate the Joker, and I think I sat there for a good 5-10 minutes being like, okay, where's the story going? I thought, maybe my disc had scratched or something was wrong with my console. And then I realized that if I pressed a button, the flames started to come on. And then it was kind of cathartic being able to set the Joker on fire. It was kind of neat. I liked it.
I do agree. I thought his eyes were going to open at one point. Like, I thought it was going to be like a jump scare start.
I think he does. I think he does jump scare you as you're burning him, and he kind of like pops out and does his laugh and then dies, or it fades to black or something like that. It's been a while since I've played that one, but I do remember that there were some scary parts, especially towards the end, where it felt more of like a horror game than a Batman game. And I remember that being really cool, but overall I wasn't 100% happy on how Arkham Knight finished off.
Yeah. I don't know. I just got the comic books for Arkham City. The first 5 issues, I'm not sure if you read those and that. I'm super pumped to jump into those and read it and see how it's connected with the video game.
I did read those when they were coming out. They were really, really fun, and I really, really enjoyed them. A story that I feel like not a lot of people talk about is Arkham Knight Genesis, which is a 5-issue miniseries that takes place. It's basically a retelling of Jason Todd's origin, but set in the Arkhamverse. Because we see, with Arkham Knight, Jason Todd has a little bit of a different origin story. He wasn't killed. He was kept captive by the Joker and then escaped and became Red Hood. So it's kind of like a retelling of that. It's done by Peter Tomasi, who's a really, really fantastic writer in terms of the Bat family. And it's one of those underrated Jason Todd stories that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about. Which is a shame because you get to see some really intimate moments between like him and Harley Quinn, where Harley's like, if I had known what the Joker had done to you, I think I would have stopped him or I would have saved you, but I had no idea, and things like that. And I really just like how we were able to explore more sides of Jason than what we've seen previously.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. I liked all of the games and that, so I hope to read that comic. So you said it was Arkham Knight Genesis?
Arkham Knight Genesis, yeah. It's a retelling of Jason Todd's origin.
That sounds interesting. I'll probably look for that one as well. And you said Peter Tomasi?
Mm-hmm. Peter Tomasi wrote it.
Awesome. So what are some of the comics that you think that people should be reading that you're interested in that doesn't get a lot of love, you find?
Oh, there's so many. Secret Six is the first one that I'm probably going to preach. Secret Six is a DC comic title, written by Gail Simone. I basically tell people if you like the Suicide Squad or if you like villains in general, you need to be reading Secret Six because it's both villains that we're familiar with and villains that, weren't really relevant or popular until Gail Simone made them relevant. So you see characters like Catman, you see Ragdoll, Bane shows up. She created a really great character called Vandal Savage that is Scandal Savage, which is the daughter of Vandal Savage, and she's really cool, and she's also queer, and it's just a lot of fun, and not a lot of people reading DC Comics talk about it. I always preach a lot of indie titles. So indie titles like Crowded, which is a wonderful title from Image Comics. You have titles like Insects from Aftershock Comics. A lot of people are jumping on Aftershock right now, and with good reason, because they're publishing hits like We Live, they're publishing hits like Nuclear Family, and it seems like they're just getting bigger and better. But Insects and Animosity even were two of their starting stories that not a lot of people talk about. And I'm like, these are some of the like defining books for the publisher. Anything published by Volt Comics, I'm just going to say anything published by Volt. These Savage Shores, Heathens, you name it. If Volt Comics publishes it, you probably should be reading it. So a lot of indie stuff. I think you're on mute, Trav. There we go.
I know you're reading the Wicked, or you've read The Wicked and the Divine as well.
I have. I've read The Wicked and Divine. It's been a while, and it's a series that I never finished. I think I got up to volume 4 or 5, and I believe there's like 6 or 7. And it's a series.
There's 9.
There's 9. Oh God. Okay, yeah, then I'm definitely way behind on Wick Div. Oh no.
I'm on 8 right now.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so yeah, I definitely need to do some catching up. Wick Div is one of those books that it's really interesting to me. I love all of the different characters. I love all of the character designs. I love the idea that it's these like gods and goddesses that are untouchable, and now they're being humanized, for lack of a better word. But at the same time, I also don't understand what the hell is happening in Wicked and Divine, but I'm enjoying it. It makes no sense, but I'm having fun.
Yeah, I think you get a real understanding like in the 5th volume.
Okay.
There is a lot of pages where I know you don't like when it gets wordy, but it does get pretty wordy in
No.
parts.
It's my downfall is words. I've never read a word in my life.
You go from books to reading comics, you're just like, I don't want to read that much anymore.
It's funny because it's like I can't go back to reading books. Like I've tried. And like I'll read biographies, I'll read like historical stuff that's based on truth, but when it comes to reading like fiction, I struggle with it. And I think it's because I've been so used to a creative team visualizing for me exactly what they want me to see, that I now struggle myself visualizing what an author maybe will give me in a brief couple of descriptions, where I'm like, no, please tell me and show me exactly what you want me to see, because my imagination is broken.
Comics ruined our imagination. No.
Comics ruin the imagination for sure.
That's great. Like what kind of book? I'm actually interested in some of the books that you've read throughout the years.
So in terms of like nonfiction stuff, I read a lot of like queer people in history that have like made a difference that maybe aren't talked about in media or in, you know, history books. A lot of like badass women in history. Like I just really am fascinated by women that just did the complete opposite maybe of what they were supposed to do. And ironically enough, I read a lot about like the Tudors, and Henry VIII and his circle of wives, and reading a lot into their history and, you know, everything that went on with them. And that's something that I think I carried on through, you know, middle school and high school. Was I discovered that, and I read a lot of fiction books about that. But now that I'm an adult, I've read a lot of, um, you know, nonfiction stuff. And then of course, you know, there's classics that I've carried with me into adulthood, like Tithe by Holly Black, and her Ironside series is a series that, you know, I read so much as a child that my copies are now like tatters, but I refuse to get rid of them. And every couple of years I'll go back and I'll reread those, and those I can read. Like if it's a book that I've already read, I can reread it. But if it's a new like young adult book or a new fiction book, I'm like, help, give me pictures.
That's amazing. Well, we're coming up to that hour mark. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me on this amazing Whiplash Wednesday and New Comic Book Day. The link to her channel is down below, as well as you can catch her every Sunday on Comics Will Break Your Heart over with Jennifer. And the link is for her channel is down below as well. Guys, go check it out. I think one of my favorite videos, like I think it's one of the last videos you did. No, you dropped a video since then, but was that Suicide Squad breakdown?
The Suicide Squad breakdown. So as I said, I'm a huge fan of Suicide Squad. I love their comics. I love the characters. I was really disappointed about the first movie, but the second movie gave me hope, and I'm glad, because the second movie is now probably my favorite superhero movie ever made. Y'all can fight me about that, but it's the best one ever made. And I remember watching the trailer and being like, yeah, I know Suicide Squad. I know these characters. And then you had characters like Weasel and Javelin and Mongal. And I'm like, all right, yeah, I need to do some research. I'm going to give the people what they want. And we're going to kind of break it down. So I've actually been working on a couple of other videos, not necessarily similar to it, like character breakdowns, but definitely like exploring, you know, some themes in comics. Like I'll give you a sneak peek. One of the videos that I've finished writing but have not filmed yet is a dads in comics video, where I'm talking about famous dads in comics, whether they're good, bad, or in between.
Oh, I look forward to that. Guys, go check it out on her channel. It probably is already up as this is dropping. So I look forward to that. I love the Suicide Squad one. I was just like, I know, like, pretty bummed whenever you found out like half of them died, and then all that research you did was for nothing. But you got to figure out some of these characters that you never knew, and that was the fun of it.
And some of them are just so bonkers. Like, I remember researching some of them, and like, for example, Javelin had like a paragraph on Wiki, and I'm like, okay, how do I talk about a guy that has like 5 sentences to his name? How do I make that cool? How do I make that entertaining and engaging? And hopefully I did that well enough.
Yeah, and I can see that whole Weasel thing, like how it's like, oh, Weasel and the Thinker are gonna have something because the Weasel killed the Thinker,
Yeah.
or thought he killed the Thinker.
It's definitely one of those videos that after I saw the movie, it was kind of fun to revisit it. If that sounds weird, that it's like I watched my own video, but it was kind of like fun to rewatch that video and be like, I was completely wrong on that. Like, that didn't happen at all, or maybe something did happen. I was like, okay, yeah, I kind of know what I'm talking about. So, I'm hoping possibly to do more like that in the future.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I hope so too. I can't wait to see what your dads of comics. I'm interested in that because I can guarantee you Oliver Queen's going to be on that list.
He is not. Believe it or not, he is not on that list. I should, I might have to tweak it. I might have to put him in there. Might have to squeeze him in there somewhere.
I was surprised by that. I was just like, how can? All right.
How can you not have Oliver Queen in there? No, I might have to tweak it now.
But guys, Whiplash Wednesdays is continuing. Nick Comic Culture is dropping his second video of the day because he's overcompensating for something. Come on, Nick. Like, come on. Stop it. And then Brandon, that's Comics Kings, and Stefan, that's Missing Link, chop it up about Crisis on Infinite Rants. What are they chopping up about this week? Who knows? Tune in and find out. Then ending the night in fashion is not Tomorrow Cinema. Tomorrow Cinema is taking a little bit of a break. So it's going to be Big Herm Collectibles. See what he has cooking for his show. And then always catch Big Herm Collectibles, Missing Link, and Fable on Sunday nights for the hashtag Blame Fable show. I just want to say thank you again, Mars, for joining me.
Thank
that
you for
comic
having me.
girl. The link is down below to her channel. Go check out the Suicide Squad video. Look forward to seeing her Dads of Comics with Oliver Queen now added to the list over under her channel as well. Go sub up to Comics Will Break Your Heart. You'll see her over there every Sunday for a great conversation. I like the best duo in like this community, I think.
Thank you. We think so. Well, we hope. I don't want to say we think so. We hope so too.
So again, thank you so much. This was long overdue. I love chatting with you, getting to know you more and that. And yeah, it was just fantastic.
It was awesome. I had a blast. Thank you for having me.
Make sure to hit that like button on your way out. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. And make sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Station everyone. And as always, stay nerdy, my friends.